know that we simulcast on 3 different platforms. Of course, Facebook, Periscope, and the grand channel. YouTube is where we're at, and we're on now. We are live. And hello, welcome back to another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gruler. I am a criminal defense attorney. We're based in Scottsdale, Arizona. My team and I, over the years, have helped thousands of people facing criminal charges, and we started this show Watching the Watchers because we want to do that. We want to hold anybody who's involved in the criminal justice system accountable. And more specifically, I'm talking about prosecutors, politicians, judges, and of course, police, the police officers who we are seeing everywhere on the news, causing mayhem and causing havoc throughout our society. It's important that we address these things. And for many years, I've made this my life's work. We want to help good people in difficult situations get their lives back on track. We started this show before George Floyd had passed away. We've been holding law enforcement officers accountable for many, many, many years. And so I was excited yesterday when there was going to be some sort of development. We were going to have a conversation on a national level about some of these issues, but I was extremely disappointed from what we saw. Of course, I'm talking about the House Judiciary Committee hearings that took place almost all day yesterday with Attorney General Bill Barr. So we're going to talk a lot about that today. I've got some clips that I want to run through. It's going to make up the crux of the show. We've got some other stories we can get to if we get to them, but there's just so much to unpack here. I did spend most of the day sort of in and out of the hearings yesterday. I would say I watched probably 80% of them. I was doing other things and running our office and doing the work that I need to do, but it was one of the most embarrassing things that I have ever seen in my time talking about criminal justice reform and the criminal justice issues that are so important to me and the work that we do. And so I want to start by going through a lot of what we saw at the hearing, because I think a lot of our problems are manifesting in what we saw. We're seeing a lot of hyper-partisanship. We're seeing a lot of bickering, name-calling, political points, and so on and so forth that are typical to politics, but they seem just so unproductive right now that it is almost mind-blowing. Speaking as somebody who kind of lives in this world on a daily basis, criminal law is all that we do at our office. So we got to get into it. Now, when I was watching it, I was taking notes and I wrote 5 pages of reaction and commentary about the long hearings. We're going to see what we can get to today. So I'm going to kind of go through this organically and we'll see where it leads us. But what I would like to do at the outset of the show is just lay some foundation. We want to talk about who are these people, what's going on, because many people, they're not as plugged into the political world or the legal world as I am, or as maybe you are, but there's, they need to know how this stuff works before they can start understanding and making judgments about it. And so, of course, we want to talk about our United States Attorney General, who is William Barr. Bill Barr is the Attorney General. He was, of course, appointed by Trump, and he has been in there for a long time. He has become sort of a figurehead of the Trump administration in many ways. He's responsible for a lot of what we're seeing take place in the U.S. Attorney's Office, which is overseeing cases against Roger Stone and General Flynn. We've got, the Russian collusion investigation, basically anything that's happening on a national scale that involves justice. The Attorney General, who runs the Department of Justice, is in charge of those things. And so Bill Barr obviously has a lot of fire coming from all different sides, right? On the one hand, you've got all of the Democrats and sort of the liberal wing, Antifa, the protesters, the BLM groups, who are very upset about some of the activities that he has undertaken as head of the department. And on the other side, you've got Trump. You've got Trump and the Trump administration, who also have a lot of problems with Bill Barr because he is sort of not doing everything that he expects him to be doing. And so that's who we're talking about. He was the subject of the the House Judiciary Committee. I'm probably going to do that multiple times here because I'm just used to saying Senate Judiciary Committee because of the the nominations, Judge Kavanaugh, Judge Roberts, Justice Gorsuch were all, they go through the Senate Judiciary Committee in order to be on the Supreme Court. But we're not talking about the Senate. We're talking about the House, and it's really an oversight committee. And so let's talk about what the Attorney General does, and then we'll explain why he was there in front of this House committee. So here is technically what the Attorney General is supposed to do. The main role is to represent the United States in legal matters, to advise the president, and to supervise and direct the executive departments of the government. And some of the duties include supervising the representation of the U.S. government at the Supreme Court. Other courts, foreign and domestic, make recommendations to the president concerning certain appointments to the federal judicial branch, U.S. attorneys, U.S. marshals. And so we have a couple examples here of what happened. So during the Obama administration, Eric Holder voiced opinions on waterboarding, the close of Guantanamo Bay, and the transfer of terrorists back onto the homeland. Do you remember that when Barack Obama was president? There was a lot of debate about that. Republicans were up in arms. How can you bring these terrorists back to our country? We had the same type of issues happen under the Bush administration, under George W. Bush's administration, where they were talking about all of these enhanced interrogation techniques and how are we going to be detaining terrorists and so on and so forth. And so that's what William Barr is doing. He is sort of the top cop of the United States. He is the sort of chief law enforcement officer aside from the executive branch, from the president. He's very powerful, very important. He sets a lot of policies, and those policies will then trickle down to the U.S. attorneys who are going into federal courts and enacting those policies. And so when the federal courts are under sort of an attack, as we're seeing in Portland, he is the one who's responsible for dictating what the policy will be, from taking those law enforcement officers from the federal jurisdiction and sending them into Portland. So, of course, somebody in this position, somebody with this history, with this experience, is going to be called in front of the House Judiciary Committee, and they're going to ask him a bunch of questions. Now, if you read the Constitution, you know that we've got 3 co-equal branches of government, and Congress has a lot of oversight over the different branches. So remember, in civics class or in social studies or whatever you took, we have 3 co-equal branches of government, and there's a system of checks and balances. The Constitution fleshes out some rules, and they say the president can do this but can't do this. Congress instead can do those things. And Congress has certain oversight over some of the president's decisions. So we see it in the Senate, right? When the president nominates somebody to go onto the Supreme Court, they have to go through a process. They have to get advice and consent of the Senate. That's written in the Constitution. And so they do that, right? The nominees, they go in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee. They get grilled on a bunch of questions. We saw this happen with Judge Kavanaugh. We saw this happen with Judge Gorsuch. And they both got nominated and approved by the Senate. Now they are on the Supreme Court. The House has something similar. They have the ability, they've got oversight over certain functions of the executive branch. And so here is what the House Judiciary Committee actually does. They are a body that has jurisdiction over matters that relate to the administration of the federal courts, the administrative bodies, federal law enforcement agencies, and they're talking about issues like bankruptcy, terrorism, espionage, civil liberties, constitutional amendments. These types of things are very important. They're also overseeing the Department of Justice and Homeland Security, which are major topics in our world today. So Bill Barr has been called in, and he's sat down in front of the House. And if you watched any of these, I have some clips you're going to see. There was a lot of social distancing. The room was mostly empty. We had the members of the committee who were there, and then we had Bill Barr just sort of on an island in the middle of the committee room, which is normal, and he's on his own just answering questions that are being fielded by these representatives from the various states. And so who makes up the Judiciary Committee? We've got these people. So we've got Gerald Nadler, who is the chair of the Judiciary Committee, and we've got all of these other people, some of whom we heard from yesterday, some of whom we did not. I believe we heard from Karen Bass, we heard from Cedric Richmond, Hakeem Jeffries. I think I've got a clip or two from some of these people. Jamie Raskin we heard from, Pramila Jayapal we heard from, and because the Democrats are in charge of the House right now, they have more members on this committee. Whoever's in control of the House sort of gets some steering decisions on many of these committees, but there are other people and there are Republicans on this committee. So this is sort of the continuation of who else is on this committee. We've got more and more Democrats, and then we've got the Republicans. So the Republicans start down here, and they wrap up over here on this page. Some of these people were actually from Arizona. I believe we heard from Debbie Lesko yesterday, and there was somebody else. I can't recall who I heard, but quite frankly, the Republicans were just as bad as the Democrats. Both parties, as far as I'm concerned, were embarrassing to themselves and to their parties, to the criminal justice reform discussion, and to the country, quite frankly. I mean, what I saw yesterday was so embarrassing that it's hard to believe. I was talking with Faith about it and some other people, some other lawyers, and we all have a hard time even believing that this is our government. This is what is happening. If you watched it on C-SPAN yesterday, it was just a mess of questions and answers and attacks. And Bill Barr, in my opinion, was really the only one who came out looking good at the end of this entire thing. So let's dive into it. Let's start, kind of break it down into some bite-sized chunks. And one of the things I want to start with first is a transcript from Byron York. Byron York is somebody, I forget where he works. He's a big chief political correspondent for the Washington Examiner, somebody who is kind of middle of the road for most people's opinions of him. And he tweeted this yesterday after the hearing. And the reason I want to share this with you is because this is sort of indicative of how the entire hearing went. This is an actual transcript that I'm going to read through, and then we'll walk through some of the actual video clips that we saw. So, as I said, we have the House Judiciary Committee. We've got Bill Barr who comes in, and there was this pattern of question after question after question without giving Bill Barr the time to respond. And to me, it felt like it was a coordinated sort of effort. You're going to hear as we go through this show that the Democrats were repeatedly invoking the phrase, "I'm reclaiming my time. I'm reclaiming my time." They'll say, "Mr. Barr, got a question for you." He would start speaking, and they would cut him off and say, "I'm reclaiming my time." And, that was something that was very coordinated in my mind. Almost every single member of the Democrats used that phrase. I've got a clip that spliced them all together. We're going to see in a minute. But before we do that, let me show you, let's walk through the transcript so you can see how little opportunity Bill Barr had to respond to the questions. Meaning it's not political. Meaning it's only political. It's not investigatory. They're not trying to pull any questions out of him. They're just using this as a political grandstanding moment, and they're not even allowing him to explain himself, which I've got a huge problem with. So let's look at the transcripts. This comes from Byron York from the Washington Examiner, and here's what it looks like. So Democratic Representative Madeleine Dean said they wanted to know whether the Justice Department was investigating the Lafayette Park incident. So if you remember, this was the incident where right in front of the White House, there were protesters. Trump and Bill Barr and the rest of the administration cleared out the protesters, and there was a lot of uproar about that because the allegation was, and I didn't look into this too much, but the idea was that they were peacefully protesting. The White House administration came out, started firing off tear gas and pepper spray to clear the area. Then, of course, you remember that President Trump and his entourage left the White House. They walked over to the church. They took some, photographs. He got a lot of flack for that, for being, nothing more than just simple political sort of propaganda. It was a photo opportunity. And so that's what they're talking about. They're talking about this whole deal. So the Democratic Representative Madeleine Dean wants to know whether the Justice Department was investigating the Lafayette Park incident. And here is the transcript. So Bill Barr, she asks him that question. Bill Barr says, yeah, the IG is investigating it. So he presumably means the Inspector General's office. Dean says, okay, so goes through this entire paragraph right here. I guess this is the question. We'll hope that he does not get fired. Tragically, she's talking about the IG. Tragically, what happened in Lafayette Square is no longer an isolated incident. Use of chemical irritants has been used in more than 90 cities. My colleague showed you the video of the Navy vet being pepper sprayed and beaten, his bones broken. Whether or not you thought this was the appropriate at the time. Have you now called for law enforcement to stop using these chemical irritants on protesters? Yes or no? So we actually played that video last week, I believe it was, and you saw that Navy vet who was out there in front of Portland, and he's just standing there, really, and you have some lunatic in camouflage, camo gear with a baton just starts whacking him like 3 times, just pop, 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 and he just kind of stands there like, what? Like, I didn't even do anything. And he turns around. Well, apparently, you know, he got really badly injured because he just got whacked 3 times with a metal baton. And I think he had a broken arm or something like that. But it was not a good situation. So the question on that is appropriate. And I would love to know what the answer is and dive into that a little bit further and get a clear understanding from Mr. Barr about what the policy is. It's a good question. What are they doing? Are they going to be diving into these things? How are they distinguishing between peaceful protests and violent protests? When does a peaceful protest turn into a violent protest? When is pepper spray allowed or not allowed? Who's giving the authorization for these things? What types of non-chemical measures are being used? Are you setting up specific zones where these people can protest? Are protests being cut off at a certain time? Basically, what are the internal policies of the justice system, of the Justice Department? What are they doing? What are they saying that they're going to be doing? That's what would have been great to get out of this hearing. This is why it angers me so much that they didn't even let the man answer the question. This guy's in charge of so much, and they're not giving him the opportunity to speak because they need to make political points. And it's a lot of Democrats doing this, but the Republicans were literally just as useless. They didn't take up the mantle. They didn't push the ball forward anymore. All of their positions were sort of rambling, stream of consciousness thoughts that don't amount to anything. And I saw 2 representatives from Arizona who were the epitome of an embarrassing question. You're on a national stage. You have the Attorney General for the United States sitting in front of you, and you can't prepare yourself to answer a question that the rest of the country wants to know. It's embarrassing from both parties. But let's go back to the transcript. So Madeleine Dean asks the questions. Bill Barr says, yep, IG's investigating it. He responds, he says, what, pepper spray? Dean says, yes. He says, no. No? I think it's a very important non-lethal option. Dean says, for protesters? He says, no. For rioters. Sir, that was my question. For protesters? He says, no. For rioters. Yes, sir, America was founded on the principles of free speech. And Barr says, when people resist, law enforcement, they're not peaceful. Reclaiming my time, she says. I'm surprised at your lack of respect for a member of Congress. And then at that point, Gerald Nadler says the time of the gentle lady has expired, and then goes on to another representative. So one more time, how many words? She gets this whole paragraph in. She's got a number of minutes to ask him questions. He sputters out, 10 words, 15 words? And he starts to explain himself. He starts to talk about the difference between rioters and protesters, and she cuts him right off. It says, reclaiming my time, I'm surprised at your lack of respect for a member of Congress. Lady, you didn't even let him answer the question. We could have really spent some time on that. I would have loved to know what his answer was. Okay, so why is it a very important non-lethal option? Are there other non-important lethal options? Wouldn't you agree that the First Amendment is a pretty important right? So why are you dissuading that? How are you distinguishing between protesters, as you're calling them, and rioters? How are you defining rioters? They don't do that. She cuts them right off, says, reclaiming my time. I'm surprised at the lack of respect for Congress. Quite frankly, we're going to go through this thing. You're going to see it gets me so heated. Bill Barr, I cannot believe that he even sat there for as long as he did. He was taking abuse after abuse after. And listen, I am no fan of Bill Barr or the Trump administration, Department of Justice. There are a lot of problems I have with both of those things. But the fact that we can't even have a simple discussion about this when you have basically the head law enforcement officer in your congressional chambers and you can't even formulate a coherent sentence or try to pull a point out of him. Can we do anything with this question or this answer? No, we can't. So it was a total waste of time. And this was just one question. There are many of these that we're going to get to, and I believe we have a clip. So let's jump into that, where all of these Democratic senators are asking questions and then reclaiming their time. They're not even allowing him time to answer, which means what was the point of this whole hearing? What were you people doing in order to sort of advance the cause here of criminal justice reform? Let's take a look at this clip. So this was put together by, I think it was the Free Beacon. I think they have their outro at the end. Let's look at this clip.
I'm reclaiming my time, Mr. My time is limited. I have the time.
So what
Reclaiming my time.
Yeah, I'm answering your question.
Well, you got to let him answer.
Reclaiming my time. Reclaiming my time, sir. Reclaiming my time, and I know you don't want to answer.
I'm not saying that.
I reclaim my time.
Reclaiming my time.
Reclaiming my time, Mr. Attorney General. Reclaiming my time.
Reclaiming my time. Reclaiming my time, Mr. Attorney. Reclaiming my time. Reclaiming my time, Mr. Barr.
Okay, reclaiming my time. Excuse me, the time is fine.
I'm starting to lose my temper. Excuse me, Mr.
in
Barr,
the
this
federal
is my
government.
time, and I control it.
Happenings.
Reclaim my time, sir.
I think in another one I voted by
Reclaiming my
mail.
time. Okay, reclaiming my time.
Publication.
Reclaiming my time, sir.
I will
Quibbling
get to
over-
that. Reclaiming my time. You answered the question.
That's what-
Mr. Attorney
I
General,
think
reclaiming
that's
my
what I
time.
was talking about.
Reclaiming my time.
I've waited a long time for you to come here. The time is mine. The time is mine.
Substances.
Mr. Attorney General, reclaiming my time.
Reclaiming my time, sir.
Without a rule, I think DHS.
Reclaiming my time. I'm surprised at your lack of respect for a member of Congress.
Yeah. I'm surprised at his tremendous respect for Congress. I can't believe that he sat there as long as he did and took that. Now, this is not me trying to beat up on the Democrats at all. I mean, I think that they're more in alignment with my political views in terms of criminal justice reform than the Republicans are. And I've talked about this on the show ad nauseum. But I watched the hearing. This was not Bill Barr being overly aggressive. This was not one of those situations where he was filibustering. He would never shut up. He wouldn't stop talking. He said almost nothing the entire hearing, which was, I mean, what a waste of time, what a waste of a hearing. If this is what our government does, I mean, it's even more broken than I had already thought. It was a disaster. He was not even able to answer questions. This just happened yesterday, but I would love to see a breakdown of this. How much time was he speaking? How much time were they speaking? Did they learn anything from the Justice Department that they didn't know before going into the hearing? There were all sorts of other topics they were talking about. I mean, I can't, one of these representatives spent minutes and minutes and minutes. I think they got 5 minutes each, and they were just from one to the other talking about these weird hypotheticals that have nothing to do with what's going on in our world right now. Some of our issues are really important. We're talking about Russian collusion. We're talking about the integrity of our elections, or voter fraud, mail-in ballots. Those are sort of ancillary. The bigger ones, of course, are cities are burning down. People are protesting. People are rioting. People are getting killed. We've got the coronavirus lock. I mean, we've got a lot of serious issues to talk about. And there was some representative who was saying, they're trying to dive into the issue as to whether or not Trump would leave office after the election. What would you do if Trump doesn't leave office? Has there been any indication that that's going to happen? Is that a realistic problem? To me, it sounds like a hypothetical problem that we can deal with in January if Trump loses the election. But right now it's July, and we're trying to solve some of the more pressing problems. Whether Trump leaves office or not, if he loses, yeah, that's going to be a big issue, but that is not the important issue right now. Why were they not asking him about how he's going to handle these protesters or these rioters, or what are they going to do with federal law enforcement? There are so many more pressing issues that each one of these different representatives was just having their moment. They wanted their few 5 minutes in front of the camera, which is why they're all reclaiming my time. Give that time back to me. It's mine. I've got more political stuff to say, and they're going to take full advantage of that. Now, again, this was not just the Democrats. The Republicans were just as bad. I heard from a number of them, and I'm thinking, who are these people? What are they doing? Even the Republicans couldn't put together a coherent thought between the 10 of them, or however many there are on this committee. Here's a weird question that came up, and the reason I want to highlight this question is because it's almost like the Republicans were playing kind of patty cake with Bill Barr. So the Democrats were very angry, and they're scolding him for 5 minutes. They're not letting him answer any questions. We had a couple representatives call in over Zoom, over Skype, and they're basically just berating him minute after minute. They go to the next person, more and more and more. Well, it goes over to the Republicans, and do you think that the Republicans are going to go, hey, okay, Mr. Barr, yeah, I don't know what they're doing over there, but I've got some serious questions. I've got some policy questions. Okay, my constituents back home are concerned about their safety and their well-being and defunding the police. Is this something that's happening? Is this being discussed? Are there any budgetary adjustments that are taking place? What are you doing to protect the people's right to peacefully protest, to peacefully assemble? How are you going to be distinguishing between riots and protests? There are many, many issues. I don't have to keep beating them all up, but they don't. They go into these weird, like patty cake back rub stuff. We had Matt Gaetz. We had many of the other representatives saying things like, thank you so much for your service. Gosh, I know it's hard and I know it's really difficult, but gosh, you're amazing. Thank you so much for all that you're doing and just in the service of our country. And then they go off on some bizarre, tangent that has no relation to anything that we're talking about. So here is a congressman. This is Representative Doug Collins from Georgia, who kind of has this mumbling, bumbling, weird, bizarre statement about what happens if they go burn down the congressional building. What are they going to do? And you can see Bill Barr, he doesn't even know how to answer these questions. I think he realizes he's in a room full of just jokers. Some of the, least qualified people to be talking about any of these issues are, for some dumb reason, on the Judiciary Committee. And they ask him questions, and even the patty cake questions, he's just like, all right, whatever. And here he is asking this one.
But I want to continue just on this, quote, peaceful protest for a second. You made a comment just a second ago on these rights. Talking about the courthouse is just down the street. What if they decided, do you think that this body right here would rise up if they decided to go tonight and paint the Capitol building?
This body, I'm not sure.
I think this side would. I'm not sure. This other side, I'm not so sure. It may be the peaceful protest to burn down the Capitol. Maybe we're back to 1812 again. But
yeah, so, and this clip, the reason I pulled this one was because I saw it floating around on the conservative media on Twitter, like, oh yeah, this was a slam dunk. Look at these two. They just needled the Democrats right in the back. They're saying, well, we're patriotic. We're going to go stand up for the Capitol building, but the Democrats aren't. They're the ones who want to see all this stuff burned down. What the hell does that have to do with anything? Are you saying that the peaceful protesters are not patriotic? They're not adhering to part of what the Constitution says they're free to do? They're free to protest. As soon as it crosses over into burning Capitol buildings down, that's a separate question. But again, this is a hypothetical. It has nothing to do with anything. It's entirely a political statement and a political question. Bill Barr doesn't even have an answer for it because it's a dumb question. It's like these two guys are having a conversation over a beer and they're saying, yeah, the Democrats are losers. We're pretty great. We're pretty patriotic. Not the appropriate venue. If Rep. Collins wants to interview Bill Barr on a podcast or on a YouTube channel or something like that, they can do that. They can just, bump elbows and they can, high five each other and fist bump each other all day while trying to slam dunk on the Democrats. This was not the appropriate forum. We got some serious issues that we need to talk about, and it's not happening here. So the Democrats on the one side are dropping the ball. The Republicans are not picking it up either. They're just sort of letting this go through the wayside and sort of yucking it up. The Democrats don't like us. They're unpatriotic idiots. And we're so enlightened because we would go over and fight the Capitol building, attempts at being burnt down. And I would really like to see if Rep. Doug Collins would put his money where his mouth is. I'm going to guess that he would not. So this type of stuff, this type of behavior is garbage in my mind. Let's see what else we've got. Some other clips. And yeah, so this was the one I think that I played previously, and actually that's not that good of a clip to play. So let's go through it.
The time is mine. We've waited a long time for you to come here. The time is mine.
You've waited to talk to me like this? You didn't need to wait so long.
When asked about the use of pepper bombs fired at Americans in Lafayette Square, Attorney General.
Yeah, so Barr does kind of start pushing back a little bit. They could have just blasted him all they want. They had no reason to call him into that room if he's not going to be asked any substantive questions. The House committee, the purpose there is they need to know what's going on in the executive branch. They want to know what the Department of Justice is doing. I want to know what the Department of Justice is doing. I'm presuming that you do also, which is why you are here on this channel. Of course, you hit the subscribe button because you want to come back. Now, this went on for hours and hours and hours, the same type of insane berating that we saw. And then, it turns into even more of a political spectacle. Let's see what Mr. Jerry Nadler had to say about masks. So you saw the clip, right? You saw how spaced out everybody was. Everybody's got these masks on. And in the middle of the hearing, we've got Representative Jerry Nadler with his mask hanging off of his face, scolding other people to put their masks on. And he also has no idea what's going on in the hearing. He refers over to Matt Gaetz to say, you're next to testify. Matt Gaetz had already testified. So he's just aloof. He's totally checked out of the whole process. Here is that clip.
The gentleman yields back. I would remind Mr. Jordan, Mr. Biggs, and Mr. Johnson to stop violating the rules of the committee, to stop violating the safety of the members of the committee, to stop holding themselves out as not caring by refusing to wear their masks.
Can we get the picture?
Is it permissible to drink a sip of coffee?
It is not permissible.
Not to drink.
We can't drink coffee in the room.
Now. Get ready to ask questions. And I will.
Mr. Gates is recognized.
No.
He went, and that's why I took off my mask, Mr. Chairman.
It's my turn. I'm going to go.
Okay.
The gentleman yields.
So that's how the entire hearing was. I mean, we got Rep. Jerry Nadler with his mask hanging off his face, scolding, of course, the other Republicans. They're next up to ask questions. They can't even drink coffee. The whole thing just became an embarrassing political joke. Nothing substantive came out of it. Jerry Nadler, of course, he just made the news very recently because he has no understanding of what's taking place in Portland by his own admission. He's calling it a myth. And so I want to pause on this point, and I want to show you this clip. This came from Flecka's. If you're familiar with the political world, Flecka's talks. This is somebody who I don't follow specifically, but I've seen him all over the place. He does this man on the street type of stuff, and he actually connected with Jerry Nadler in D.C., and here is what that exchange looked like while we're talking about justice. So my point is, maybe Jerry Nadler could have asked some questions about this. What really is happening in Portland? Let's take a look. This happened, I think, the day before the hearings. Here it is.
It is true. There's violence across the whole country. Do you disavow the violence from Antifa that's happening in Portland right now? There's riots.
That's a myth that's being spread only in Washington, D.C.
About Antifa in Portland?
Yes.
Sir, there's videos everywhere online. There's fires and riots. They're throwing fireworks at federal officers. DHS is there. Look online. It gets crazy, Mr. Nadler.
Wow.
Yeah, so he says it's a myth. That's clearly not the case. I've got some stuff I want to run through as it relates to the Portland protests, but we do have some takeaways that I think are pretty important from the hearing. Some stuff did come out despite every single House of Representative member doing almost nothing to get any substantive information out of Bill Barr. We do have some pretty good takeaways, some stuff that I heard and I said, yes, that is a step in the right direction. Now, a lot of this took place because he just volunteered it. I think he just said, all right, look, we're doing this, even though you're not asking me, about any of these substantive questions, I'm going to answer them anyways. So the first thing that he did was he announced the formation of a federal record-keeping entity. And the purpose of this was to collect all of the data on police incidents that involve the use of force. So there was a discussion, and are there any details about this? I haven't seen them yet. The hearing was just yesterday, so maybe this is going to come out in the next few days, but there were not even hardly any questions about it, about what I saw. So we have this national agency that they're going to be creating that's going to be sort of the clearinghouse. So different departments from different states, different localities. This is a big operation in order to consolidate this data. And specifically what he's talking about is cops who shoot, kill people, or injure people, but we don't know what the specifics are. Are these only going to be killings? Are these going to be anytime a gun is drawn, anytime shots are fired? Is it going to be anytime somebody dies in police custody? Is this going to be all police misconduct? Are we going to have a central clearinghouse? And then how is this going to be implemented across the board? Are we going to start with some of the big ones like NYPD, LAPD, Phoenix PD, some of the big cities? What's happening in Minneapolis? How are we going to apply this to the literally tens of thousands of small police departments around the country in small locales and small jurisdictions? So how are we going to do that? Can we talk about it at all? Or are we just going to just reclaim my time? I'm reclaiming my time. And he volunteered that information, and they had almost no follow-up questions about it. Would have been a very good thing to learn more about, but instead we spent about 8 hours listening to almost every single person in that room embarrass themselves for their 5-minute time slot. Some other takeaways that came out of the testimony that I saw yesterday was that Bill Barr is basically doubled down, and he's saying that we are going to continue to protect federal property. Federal property meaning the courts. And the courts are an important federal within federal jurisdiction. So if you remember, we've got kind of these different layers of jurisdictions throughout our country. You've got states that have their own constitution, their own rules, their own statutes. And then you've got the federal system that has their own, it's called federalism, right? We've got states' rights, we've got federal government rights. Some states have the power to do certain things, while some of those rights are reserved to the federal government. And there's a complex interweb of these different rights and responsibilities and obligations going every which way, every direction. And so, Bill Barr is saying that one of the main things that the federal government needs to do is to protect federal property. And that's the reason why they brought the protesters in, or the law enforcement officials from the federal government, to come and handle the protesters. And I got to be honest with you, I can't disagree with that. I cannot disagree with the federal government protecting federal property. That federal court is very important. It's very, very important. There are people that have cases that are going through there. There are many, hundreds and thousands of defendants, people with cases who need to see their cases resolved. We've got courts, we've got judges in there. We've got court clerks in there. We've got U.S. attorneys and prosecutors. You've got defense attorneys like myself. I'm a big believer that change should happen within the justice system, but burning down a federal court building and eliminating or overthrowing, the United States government in a way that is not going to allow other people to access justice it's just simply not acceptable. It just isn't. And I happen to agree with federal Attorney General Barr on this point. When peaceful protesters become violent, the government needs to do something about this. And this is pretty consistent, I think extremely consistent across all of the other videos that I've made on this channel. Property rights are very important and we need to protect them. I empathize with the protesters. I empathize with the cause. I've made it my life's work. Justice reform, my life's work. And this is something I'm very passionate about. But that doesn't mean you have the ability and the freedom to start going and destroying other people's properties. That is not okay. It cannot happen. If the federal government said that they're not going to protect our federal courts or our federal buildings, then what would stop this same incident from happening all around the rest of the country? It's happening in Portland. We saw these little sparks happen in Minneapolis and Seattle. And if federal law enforcement stands down, these court buildings are going to literally burn to the ground. And if you think that's hyperbole, we're going to run through some other footage from other people who are boots on the ground that show that these peaceful protests are turning into violent protests. When that happens, there needs to be a response from the federal government. And quite frankly, I think to not do so is actually undermining our cause. It is hurting the cause of criminal justice reform. To allow continued property destruction, fires being set, buildings burned down, people being killed, it is not winning the hearts and minds of other Americans. And we need those people in order to advance our cause. So I actually totally side with Bill Barr on this one. We have to stop these violent protests, these violent riots that are sort of evolving into property destruction, mayhem, chaos, and death. And this was something that was a big part of the discussion here, right? But we didn't have the opportunity to dive into it at all. At the hearing, there was a lot of talk about peaceful protests. The Republicans played this video of, burning, chaos, mayhem, riots, and lunacy happening all throughout the country. The Democrats came back and they played one that was all kumbaya. It was the moms in t-shirts. It was peaceful protesters locking arm in solidarity. It was, signs. It was peacekeeping. It was something that I could get behind. And I was behind for a very long time. I've covered it on this show. I covered it last week. We talked about the moms in the yellow shirts. I support protesting. I support the ability to go out and petition your government for redress of grievances. I am a huge proponent of criminal justice reform. But when you start burning buildings down, the government has to react. The government has to respond. And that's what Bill Barr's point was. But there was no diving into the specifics of it. Again, how do you distinguish between the two? When is it appropriate for law enforcement to act? When it is appropriate for them to fire pepper spray or to arrest people and bring them into custody? And the whole thing just, it wasn't ever addressed. It was a big, big problem that I think was a total waste of time and not very productive. And the other thing I wanted to mention was when we're talking about these peaceful protesters, this is not a popular opinion in my community. Not a popular opinion, I think, amongst a lot of defense attorneys, and even some people at our office disagree. This is not our firm's position. This is my position. For many years, my position with police officers, there was a meme floating around on the internet. I think even Joe Rogan mentioned it, but it illustrates a very good point. If you have 10 police officers and you have, of the 10, you have one cop who does something bad. You have one cop who breaks the law, who violates policy, who kills somebody, who murders somebody, who does something unethical. What do you have? You have one bad cop, right? You got 10 officers, one guy does something bad, you've got one bad cop. If you take that same situation and the other 9 officers saw that cop do something bad and they don't speak up about it, they don't do anything about it, they don't take a position on it, what then do you have? You have 10 bad cops. It's not just one guy anymore. It's you can say it's unfair if you want. You can say it's guilt by association, and that's not something that you believe in. But this is something I've been railing against all the time. When people say all cops are bad, or I empathize with that argument because I do see it as a cultural problem amongst our law enforcement officials. One person does something bad, the cops circle the wagons around that cop, and I've covered it on the show many times. That cop will then, resign, step down. They'll be put on an administrative leave. The police unions get involved. Everybody comes to that cop's side, and they want to support him through the entire ordeal. That is wrong. I think you would agree with me on that. Everything about that is wrong. The cover-up, the hiding, the sweeping under the rug, we're still seeing it across the board, right? Breonna Taylor's, have her murderers been brought to justice? Not that I've seen. Ahmaud Arbery, remember those 2 guys who were one of them was formerly involved with that law enforcement agency? All of that would have been swept under the rug. If there wasn't even video footage for George Floyd, do you think those cops would have been arrested? No, it would have all been swept under the rug because everybody just circles the wagon and supports the cops. I've been saying for a very long time that the cops need to start policing themselves better, or they need to open themselves up to civilian oversight, or we need to make the Brady list more available, or we need to get rid of qualified immunity. I mean, I've gone through the solutions ad nauseum on this program, but that's what I'm saying. We need internal accountability, and the people who are associating with bad people are also just as bad. They're associating with people who are doing bad things, and they don't get to hide in anonymity and claim that they're just innocent bystanders. These other cops who are just standing around saying, well, I didn't know that he was going to suffocate the guy. He had his knee on his neck for 9.5 minutes or 8 minutes and 46 seconds, and I didn't know. Well, we don't care, guys. You were standing there. You knew what was happening. You should have spoken up, and you should have stood up and done something about it, but you didn't. That's why we're going to charge you with crimes. That's why you broke the law. And so that same standard, whether you like it or not, needs to be applied to these violent protesters. I'm seeing a lot of people on Twitter. I'm seeing a lot of people, of other defense attorneys out there saying, this is all unlawful. Federal law enforcement has no business being here. They're occupying, state sovereign lands and all of this stuff, and everything that's happening, all of the arrests being made, all of the response from law enforcement agencies who are set up to protect the federal courthouse, like that is some big, insane, abridgment of their freedoms. No, it's not, guys. If you're a peaceful protester and you're standing around and you're associating with non-peaceful protesters, if you're part of the same deal and those people are going and they're burning buildings down and they're killing people and they're beating each other and all of those things, yes, you are going to get lumped up into that. It's just how it goes because we can't distinguish between the two of you. Now, I would have loved to have asked Attorney General Barr, maybe there are some additional things that we can do to distinguish that. So, for example, what if we just brought people out, or what if we announced on loudspeaker that peaceful protests will be allowed up until 8 o'clock, after 8 o'clock. If there's any violent protesters who are still out there lighting things on fire, throwing things, trying to push gates over. My understanding is that there's been actual protesters who've broken through the barricades and actually entered into the courthouse. There are people setting fire on buildings all over the place now. If those things are happening, the protests will now be declared unlawful protests, and these countermeasures will be employed. We will employ releasing, from speaking on behalf of Attorney General Barr, we're going to release these pepper spray, countermeasures. And if you get caught up in that, sorry, we gave you advance warning, and we've notified you. We've said over here we're not going to use that stuff. We're gonna set up this little safe, protest zone, because we can't have you throwing Molotov cocktails at our federal courthouse. We want to support the ability to freely protest. We understand you have a lot of problems with this administration. You can protest over here, or we have to create a distance between you and the actual courthouse so that we can have a conversation about it. Maybe that's not the right solution. Maybe there are other creative ways that we could work this out, but we didn't see that. Nobody had any ideas. Nobody had any discussion with Attorney General Barr about how this could potentially move forward in a way that is going to, be productive. And that just didn't happen. Instead, we have, like the clip I just played for you on Flecka's, we have Jerry Nadler who's saying that none of this stuff is happening. And so if he believes that it's a myth and he doesn't think that it's not that it's not violence, well, can we even start a conversation about it? Can you even have a serious discussion with somebody who says that the violent protesters are a myth? Is that something that we can do? Because I can assure you, it's not a myth. It's pretty damn violent from what I have been seeing. Here is, I'm going to show you Andy NGO. As I don't know how you say his name, but I follow this guy on Twitter. He's boots on the ground all over these different places. His reporting is excellent, and he's got a lot to say about a lot of what he's seeing, a lot of the violence. Let's just take a look. So I just pulled up his Twitter feed. Here we go. We've got two women who were arrested, charged with beating a Wisconsin lawmaker during a protest. So this person, State Senator Tim Carpenter, a Democrat from Milwaukee, was attacked in Madison on June 24th as he pointed his phone towards a group of protesters. They beat him. Apparently, he had to have surgery. He required surgery for his injuries. They repeatedly punched and kicked him in the head, took a photo of the rioters. So that is an actual state senator who is getting beaten up and seriously injured to the point of needing surgery out of Milwaukee. Is that it? No, of course it's not. Many other incidents. So let's see. Just scrolling right through. He's got a lot of videos here. So only camera. Here we go. Live streaming protests. There's all sorts of back and forth about not being able to live stream. We've got Umbrella Man who's been around. We've got riots taking place. You got smoke and everything here. You've got this more Umbrella Man. This is what it looks like. So a rioter jumps over a barrier and lights some incendiary device to throw at the Portland federal courthouse. So you've got all of these people. You got one person jumping over. I mean, look at this place. Look at this trash. Look at this garbage. This is a federal courthouse, folks. And this is not the only incident. So there he is. Here's some more. Let's see what else we've got. So here's another incident. So multiple fires burning in Portland. They are firing mortars at the courthouse as well. They're firing mortars at the courthouse. Federal officers have given at least 6 audio warnings to stop the criminal violent behavior. So, I mean, what else can you do on that? 6 warnings. This tweet took place before somebody else jumped over the fence and then lit an incendiary explosive and then threw it at the federal courthouse. So what are we supposed to do here? Are we supposed to just say, yeah, you guys are right. We understand you're upset. And if you want to burn down all of our court buildings, feel free. Good luck to you. And we'll just let you go through it. And you can start in Portland and you can go to Seattle, you can come to Arizona, and you can just keep torching things until you're satisfied. Is that the response that we should be giving to these people. Here are some more arrests from Andy's Twitter feed. You've got, more and more of these people who are sort of aligning with the communist Antifa party. Their media saying they're white supremacists. These people are very clearly, from Antifa. They're, communists. And so here's a very peaceful bomb. Rioters threw a bomb at the front of the Portland Federal Courthouse. This wasn't one of their usual fireworks explosives. Let's take a look at that one.
What the fuck?
Everybody's cheering.
I don't know what that was.
Everybody's cheering. Everybody's very happy about those peaceful bombs being thrown all over the place. We've got more. We've got in Oregon, Eugene, Oregon, a small city with a large Antifa presence, targeted the federal courthouse, numerous businesses. They started fires and smashed smashed windows. This one came over from Facebook. I want that one to load. Let's see. More arrests. So, it's really hard to do almost anything else other than set up barricades, give them audible warnings, and ask them to leave. If they don't leave and they keep throwing incendiaries at federal buildings, they got to respond. They have to respond. There's nothing else that you can do. And unfortunately, we had almost no information from the Democrats or the Republicans about Bill Barr. It certainly looks like to me they are prepping for, essentially like a war, like a ground war. They're trying to, take over the courthouse or do something like that. But what we're seeing across, let me see if I can pull this one up before I move on. Yeah. So here, this one came from Facebook. This was from the Eugene Police Department. And so you can see some of these So what do they want, right? What is the question? Abolish. Don't know what that says. Abolish by any means necessary. So, these are some of the things that people want. They're knocking signs down, pigs, F the 12. This looks like, just a private business, FU, shattering windows. We've got abolish by any means, more shattered windows. All cops are bad. Capitalism, down with capitalism. And it just goes, F ICE, F Bezos. What we're seeing is, my point is I don't know what they want. It sounds like to me they want just a general overthrow of all capitalists of America. They want to install their own entity. I mean, we had CHOP, we had Chaz, kind of the same thing. We've got some of these other autonomous zones being set up. But what the heck do they want, right? It's been 62 days, I believe it was, 62 days since George Floyd was murdered by that cop. And we're looking for people to put together a platform. What is it going to be? What do we actually want? What is criminal justice reform? What do we want? So I was looking, or I actually typed that into Google. What the heck do the people want? Portland police declare a riot as demonstrators attack a federal courthouse. So Portland police themselves are declaring declare a riot. Protesters are trying to knock gates down, tagging everything, and it's a mess. So what do they want, right? What do these people want out of this? Let's take a look. Let's see if we can tease out some language. 58 days at this point, yelled as tear gas exploded around them. We've been out here for 58 days. You think we're giving up now? I told that man we should go home. I know they have orders, but they have a choice. We've been quiet. We told society there needed to be justice. If there is no justice, there is no peace. What does that mean? What is justice? What do they want? Is it the federal courthouse being burnt down? Is it criminal justice reform? I still don't know what that means. We need to have some specifics. And I've been saying this for about 62 days now. I have a list of specifics I've covered in other videos, but we're not seeing that. All we're seeing is that these protesters are out there about defunding the police. We're standing up for each other. We're here to protect each other. Our country is sick. We as nurses and medical workers take care of people. And right now we need to take care for Black lives because they are being killed. They're being murdered. Right now, okay, white people have cuts on our fingers. So I'm amazed by the solidarity. It's beautiful to see people are here because it matters, and so on and so on and so forth. So there's nothing really there. You know, if they were all there saying, look, we're going to be here. We've been here for 58 days. We're going to be here for 6 months. We're going to be here for 12 months if necessary. We are not going to leave here until qualified immunity across the entire United States is ended, because cops need to be held accountable for their actions that are not in alignment with police policy. If they break policy, if they're out there killing people, we're going to end qualified immunity so we can go after them. They do not get the shield of the law. We're going to file civil suits against them. We're going to charge them criminally. Or how about we're going to end police unions? We are going to be here until the police unions, who are so responsible for all of the hidden misconduct that we see from officers across our country, until they are abolished, we are not going to leave this federal courthouse. But there is none. I have not seen that anywhere. I have not seen it anywhere. All I see is language like this. It's great to be here. Solidarity, you know, it matters. Justice reform. I can't believe the support is so great. Life is so good, right? And so what do they want? Well, they have a legal arm. They have a legal arm of the ANTIFA, I guess, the National Lawyers Guild. So also this one comes from Andy. He says that the National Lawyers Guild, the NLG, is the main anarchist, communist, legal organization that provides pro bono help to Antifa criminal suspects. Their attorneys and volunteers in green hats do cop watching as well, protests and riots. National Lawyers Guild. So here we've got a statement from one of the executive director of the National Lawyers Guild. So this is somebody who, you know, is presumably somebody with a plan, a platform, with some ideas on how to fix this entire situation. What does this person say about what they want? Are we going to get any concrete information about it? Let's see. So here we've got NLG anti-racism co-chair, third-year law student. She spends her free time working with local anti-racist, anti-fascist groups to fight white supremacy at the university and in her community. She's an anti-racism trainer and works for the ACLU, Knowing Your Rights and Legal Observer Training. She's also a sister, so on and so forth, jailhouse lawyer, legal worker. It's a small collective, so they're basically, providing pro bono representation for people who get in trouble for protesting. So they're representing Antifa or BLM or any of these other groups who are out there protesting. They're going to come to their aid. For what purpose? I don't know what it means. What is her free time working with local anti-racist and anti-fascist groups to fight white supremacy? What the hell is that? I have no idea what that means. And so, honestly, at this point, it's been 2 months. At the beginning of the protest, at the beginning of the riots, this was something that I was comfortable supporting because I wanted to give it time to develop and mature into something that could really be a movement. And I know that things take time to develop. I understand that not every organic demonstration is going to sort of coalesce into a framework that is going to have a cohesive plan. I get that. But it's been now 62 days, and it's also been something where this has had enough time to work its way up the chain of command. The Democratic House of Representatives, the representatives on the House Judiciary Committee, the people who were explaining this stuff to Bill Barr, the Republicans are just as culpable. They had no interest in tackling any of these issues. They parried them all away, and the whole thing has just been a joke. So at this point in time, I can no longer support these protests that are sort of pseudo peaceful, pseudo violence. Yeah, I just can't do it. The analogy again that I use is the police, right? If let's look at any one of the officers who I've covered on this show ad nauseum. Let's pick any one of them. The cops who killed Rayshard Brooks, the cops who killed Breonna Taylor, the cops who killed George Floyd, the cops who killed Ahmaud Arbery, all of them, and many, many more. Those are just some of the recent ones. They were mostly peaceful, right? Mostly peaceful. Most of their lives were peaceful. Every day they went home after work. Every day they spent time with their families and their kids. They did one thing bad, and now they're murderers, and now they need to be held accountable for it. So for this idea that these protests are just simply mostly peaceful, and therefore we have to accept and acquiesce to all of the other nonsense that they're doing, like burning buildings down, beating people up, like state senators, beating them up to the point where they're in the hospital getting surgery, burning buildings down, killing people, that is not okay. You are now commingling your efforts with an entity that is really setting back the criminal justice reform movement. And that's why I get so irritated about this entire thing. It's ruining all the progress that we're making. When George Floyd had some psycho lunatic cop have his knee on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, the country was unified on this thing. Everybody wanted to see some changes. Everybody was talking about things like qualified immunity and ending police unions and justice reform and a national Brady list and all of those things. That has just evaporated. We were unified. We all saw that this was a very disgusting thing that happened. And finally, for the first time in the 7 years that I've been practicing, we started to see a national conversation on criminal justice reform. We were unified. Man, all of the boats were rowing in the same direction. And now what has happened? The defund the police movement is probably the dumbest branding decision I've ever heard ever. We just want to defund all of the police. Do you think that everyday middle Americans are going to be on board with that idea? Not at all. But ending qualified immunity? Yeah, maybe. That's probably a pretty good one. Some of the other things are probably pretty good ones, and we could have conversations about that. But we can't do it now because the media and the stuff that we're seeing, and because the protesters have gotten out of hand to the point where they're ruining the cause. They are burning buildings down and they're causing chaos. And the right is going to pick up on that all day long. The people who I've kind of beaten up on the show about always, being bootlickers to law enforcement and the police, and anything that the cops do is heroic, and they're just out there sacrificing themselves for our well-being all of the time. Their positions are being validated. They're looking at the news. They're looking at the same clips. They're looking at what is going on around the world, and they are disgusted by it. As am I. I'm as pro-free speech, as anti-government as anybody I know. But what we're seeing on the streets is not okay. It's not okay to destroy other people's property and burn things down and then run away and claim that you're just exercising your freedom of speech. That is not what we're talking about for freedom of speech or for freedom of association. So if these groups are commingling with these other violent groups, then they are just as bad as the good cops who say nothing when bad cops commit heinous offenses. They're just as bad. I have to hold that same standard of accountability across the board because it's the right thing to do. We want to see this move forward. And anytime that one of these movements or one of these politicians or any one of these judges or prosecutors is out there doing something that's going to hurt the criminal justice reform movement, I have to say something about it. And so for a long time, for 60-something days, I have been deferring my position on the protest because I wanted to give it time to coalesce, to come up with a plan, to come up with a strategy that's going to move the ball forward. And that just hasn't happened. Every day, in fact, it's getting worse. I'm looking at these NLG.org. I'm looking at the leaders of this movement, and the only thing I'm seeing or reading about is down with the system, ANTIFA, anti-fascist, white supremacy, white racism, and all of these things. And we have no ability to win the hearts and minds or to really implement any meaningful change. Defund the police is a failed idea. It will never happen in this country. It is a pipe dream, as it should be. It's not even a good idea. We're seeing it around the country. I don't have the stats right now, but murders are up. Crime is up across the board. It looks like a disaster out there where they're making some of these changes. And so the pendulum is going to swing the other way. I talk about that also here a lot. We are seeing, right after George Floyd died, we saw the whole country coalesce and say that we want to see some meaningful change. The pendulum is swinging back the other direction, everybody. And it is a damn shame. It's really heartbreaking to see it because we were in unison and we were moving forward. And now, from what I'm seeing, I just can't support it anymore. So, like many others, it's time to disavow what we're seeing. The violent protesters or even the peaceful protesters that are commingling with the violent protesters, it's hard to tell the difference. Got to disavow it. You got to disavow it because it's now hurting our movement. And I can't be in alignment with something that's doing that. We got to keep our eye on the bigger picture, on the bigger ball here. We want actual, meaningful, substantive change, substantive reform. I get that people are pissed off. I'm as pissed off as anybody, but that doesn't mean you can go out there and burn things down and injure people and beat people. It's not acceptable. And if you're welcome to do it, But the government's welcome to respond. You're welcome to go out there and throw stuff at federal buildings. The government's free to tear gas you. It's part of the game. If you want to play that game, you're entitled to do it, but it's not something that I can support because it is undermining everything that we're doing, everything that we're working for. All of the great people across all of the different organizations who feel this sort of need to support the protesters because it's like, oh, that's my team. That's my team. I care about those people. I care about those issues. I'm also pissed off about this stuff. But my team is really screwing it up. Really, really failing on basically every level. And I got to say something about it. I have to say we got to correct our course on this thing because the reaction from the rest of America when they see this and they see, maybe we'll see some proposals at some point. I still have not seen any, but if we do, the response is going to be so visceral. People are going to be so angry about it that they're just not going, anything that you propose at this point, people are basically drawing lines in the sand. If it has anything to do with criminal justice reform, people are now associating what they're seeing in Portland, what they're seeing in Chaz and Chop, what they're seeing in Minneapolis, what they're seeing in Oregon. They're associating that with criminal justice reform, defund the police, and get rid of federal law enforcement. Let us burn down whatever we want. That is not a winning argument. It is not winning branding. It is not winning any hearts and minds. And we need those people to vote and do things. And I mean, most of these people are very anti-Trump. Have you seen the polls recently? This activity is moving Trump's poll numbers up. There was an article today on hotair.com from one of my favorite bloggers. His name's Alla Pundit. He's saying that in the battleground states, the numbers are tightening. Trump's law and order message is the one that is catching steam because the pendulum is swinging back the other way. People are pissed about it, and I don't blame them for it. All right, so, whew. Boy, there is a lot there. I do get fired up about it, but let's see what else. Let me check my notes. Yeah. So another thing, right? All this is happening. And now the police are even saying that they're going to pull out of the DNC. They're going to pull out of the Democratic National Convention. So they're not even going to show up and actually support or provide security for the Democratic Convention. More than 100 police agencies are withdrawing agreements to send personnel to bolster security next month at the Democratic National Convention in Milwaukee, in part because they're concerned about a recent directive ordering police to stop in the city to stop using tear gas to control crowds. So scrutiny of the police the point of me sharing this story is that people are going to notice this. People are going to start seeing more and more that law enforcement just isn't around anymore. And you're kind of on your own. And that's a scary thing. Fear is so powerful. When people think, I can tell you so many people that I've heard from in the last couple months that have went out and bought guns, they're first-time gun owners, my own family included. People are scared. And if you don't think that's going to be reflected at the polls in November or when people mail in their ballots, you're missing the bigger picture here. People are going to vote, and they're going to vote for law and order. They may be very upset with criminal justice, with cops. They may think cops are bad, but if it's a choice of the two worlds. Which world do you want to live in? Do you want to live in Portland with things being burnt down and tear gas flying around, or do you want law and order? Every single, suburban household, every single person who's got kids or wants to protect their elderly mom or something like that, they want the cops. They don't want them going anywhere, and they don't want their cities to look like Portland. So when you're out there thinking that you're fighting for a revolution and that you're going to cause this massive overthrow in the United States and solve criminal justice reform, you're probably working to re-elect President Donald Trump. Just a thought. So if that's something that you're okay with, you are welcome to do that. All right, we got one more story I want to close out the day with, something a little bit lighter. Let's talk about Ghislaine Maxwell. Ghislaine Maxwell, of course, she is still in the middle of her investigation. So Maxwell's lawyers are now demanding that incriminating nude photos and sexualized videos of the Epstein madam be marked as highly confidential in the sex trafficking trial. So what does this mean? It means that there are nude photos and sexualized videos of Epstein's madam. And they're asking that it be declared highly confidential. So that means that there's video, folks. There's video, there's photos. Who's in them? I don't know, but it is going to be curious to see. So this article came from the Daily Mail, and they have a snippet. It looks like from a motion, and here's what we can make out of it. So if you look here, you'll see, no. What'd I do with it? Give me, we got a technical problem. Here it is. All right, so we've got paragraph 13, highly confidential information contains nude, partially nude, and otherwise sexualized images, videos, or other depictions of individuals. Defense counsel may at any time notify the government that defense counsel does not concur in the designation of documents or other materials as highly confidential. If the government does not agree to designate, de-designate such documents or materials, defense counsel may thereafter move the court for an order de-designating such documents or materials. The government's designation of such, okay, so on. It's highly confidential. That the point of this is they're arguing about discovery. Discovery is something that takes place in criminal law. Discovery means that you're going to be going through this process of seeing what is in each other's files. So, for example, if you get charged with the DUI, you want to see what the government has in their files. You want to see the police reports, the blood results. You want to do interviews with the criminalist. You want to talk to the responding officer. You want to talk to the phlebotomist. There's a lot that you want to look into. There's all sorts of 911 calls and CAD dispatch records and AVL data and all sorts of stuff that can be very important to your case. And so you want to start combing through that. It's in the government's possession, and you have a right to review it because you need to build your defense. And so in Ghislaine's case, they're going through that process right now. If you remember, in Ghislaine's case, they actually raided multiple of her properties and then a couple of Epstein's properties. And my understanding is they were just walking out with just hard drives and basically a wheelbarrow full of information. And they're combing through it right now. So this will be something that will be very curious. We're going to see if any of this stuff comes up because we all know who the Epsteins hung around with. And, she's still alive, which is great. It's good news. We're excited that she's still alive so that we can kind of get to the bottom of some of this. But, some weird things have kind of happened since that point in time. We have apparently aliens now are on our world. The Pentagon said that they recovered a vehicle that is not from the earthly orbit. So maybe the day before we learn about Ghislaine's insights, we learn that we are actually being visited by other species from other planets. All right. Well, listen, that's enough of me today. I want to leave you finally with the meme of the week from the Barr hearing. Here is what we've got. General Barr is in the hearing. He's trying to answer some questions, but we have the irritating seagull. General Barr, when did you stop being a Nazi? I've never. Reclaiming my time, says the obnoxious seagull. That's also what many of the Democrats and the Republicans said in the hearing. All right, so that's enough out of me. Let's go check out the comments, see if there is anything that we should address here, and I haven't even checked them thus far. So let me go ahead and mute myself. Let's see here. All right. So let's scroll back up. We got a lot of comments. Very excited that so many people are here joining us today. So we've got Olive, my young. I agree with that. Federal government buildings are built by the taxpayers. What righteousness do protesters are pulling out to destroy people's properties? That's right. Yeah, it's a property thing, right? And I've talked about it many times here from John Locke, right? You have the right to liberty, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which is in our founding documents, but it kind of stems from life, liberty, and property. We talk a lot about combining your life, trading your energy, your work. You mix that. Your labor turns into property. So property is an extension of your life, right? You work hard to go buy that new car. You're trading your time for that money to go get that car. It's almost a part of you. That's why it's so important. It's so foundational to everything we do in this country. It is critical. So if somebody just comes and burns your building down, that's That's a serious thing that needs to be dealt with. And the people out there saying, well, these are just buildings. Yeah, that's true. But they represent a lot more than that. And there's a lot just comes and burns your building down. That was me. There's a lot of important things that are taking place in that building. We've got trials that are taking place. People need access to justice. Defendants who are sitting in custody because their federal courthouse is under assault. That is not okay. They need access to justice. Matthew Meyer is here. He says, you're a civilian. I'm a cop. Show some respect. I have to deal with nonsense all day. You don't give me proper respect. And so I work hard out there, and people here are going to disrespect me. Disgusting. I'm law enforcement. Why are you lying about police officers? So he's just kind of in there, playing police officer and sort of trolling them to a certain extent, and that is not, it's a pretty good impression in my opinion. So the protesters that don't leave are just the same. That comes from Ryan W. What is the definition of peaceful in protests? Would majority rule apply? That question comes from Michael B. And yeah, that's a great question. What is that, right? What is that definition? When does a peaceful protest become a non-peaceful protest? When does peaceful become violent? When does something that's peaceful suddenly become non-peaceful that requires a government response? That's what I would have loved to have known from the Judiciary Committee. Mr. Barr, when are you going to, what is the trigger points? And I'm not talking about guns. Like what is going to cause the federal law enforcement agents to use less than lethal force, to use pepper spray, to conduct an arrest? At what point are you telling your employees, your federal agents, now it's a problem? When does that scale tip from not a problem to a problem? And you can really explore that. So, okay, so this is wrong, but this is right. And this is where you'll respond, but this is where you won't. Great. Now we've got some ground rules. We know what the rules of the game are. And that would have been very helpful for the justice reform movement. We could have, we could have coordinated around that. We could have said, cool, all right, those are your rules. Fine. We're going to live with those. We're going to live within those rules. We're going to peacefully protest, and we're going to be doing it for the next 180 days. Great. I'm fine with that. Let's do it. I'll be there with you. Let's do it. But we're not seeing that. And nobody even asked him the questions. Nobody even explored that. So it was just a massive waste of time. All right. There is all kinds of live streams going on every night. The only incident, you're funny. It's been going on for 60 days. It's been 60 days. Why protesters aren't better prepared to take cover when weapons are pointed at them confuses me. At least 20 streamers a night, says Lady Zaga. What's up, Lady Zaga? You're here every week. Good to see you. Matthew Meyer, you better agree with me. I'm law enforcement. And then Matthew Meyer's he's doing his cop routine. Thousands of people show up and he's just kind of trolling everybody. You're in control. You're in it. Okay. So we got some back and forth going on in the comments, and nothing I really need to dive into too much. Let's see. Olive says, it is an ongoing hot mass social issue, maybe hot mess. So people tend to be more likely to be cynical than they usually do. I hope you do not take it as offensive personally. I don't take it personally. No, I mean, it's something, it doesn't change what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis at all. Not at all. I mean, we've got our own mission, vision, and values that we follow here at our firm. And I know, what I want to accomplish with this program and with my life and with my career in criminal law. And I love it when I have a partner, or there's somebody else who I can say, I love what you're doing and I'm going to support you and I'm going to help you carry that ball forward. But I'm just not seeing that. I was really hopeful that this entire thing post George Floyd would come to fruition and we would see some momentum. We would see some people who are better, speakers for this cause. I'm not, right? I am not the ideal person to go lead the charge on this thing. I don't want to. Nobody wants me to. Nobody's asked me to. But that doesn't mean that if I didn't see somebody who was, I think, in alignment or was moving the ball right, or was, had good branding and actually had some actionable ideas, man, I would be linking to them. I'd be asking them for interviews on this show and say, let's promote you. Let's talk about these things. But we just haven't seen that. But I don't take it personally. It does irritate the hell out of me that this is not something that is being more productive, because I thought we had a very golden opportunity there that we are losing literally by the minute because of what we're seeing happen. All right. Respect is earned. Somebody says, good insight. I agree. It is the right time to reform criminal justice. defund the police is worldwide. Trump already said he'd veto any defund the police. Police, the law and order, of course. How are police budgets so large and salaries so low? That comes from Michael B., which I don't think that's really that accurate. So at least in Phoenix, I don't know what the national numbers look like, but I mean, you can be 20 and a half years old and join the police academy, and then after 15, 20 years working there, you're making $200,000, $180,000 or $160,000. I mean, we have some extremely high-paid cops here. Like insanely high, in my opinion, way too high. But that's because of the unions. That's because of the contracts they negotiate. They can get a ton of money with very little accountability. They have to do very little, recertification for certain things. I've been in trials with cops, and I said, "Hey, when was the last time that you were recertified to use that radar gun?" Well, I don't know, 1986. Oh, so you haven't done any additional training or recertification? Nope, we're not required to. Why not? I don't know. And so it's just like they just kind of get on, they ride out their career for 15, 20 years. They collect with a massive pension, and they're making $200,000 a year. It's nuts. All right. Lady Zaga back. She says, I think perhaps Americans forget the USA was built in extreme violence. Christopher Columbus, who is currently highlighted, did not discover America. He enacted the doctrine of discovery. The doctrine of discovery established a spiritual, political, and legal justification for colonization, seizure of land not inhabited by Christians. It has been invoked since Pope Alexander VI. Issued the papal bull Inter Caesaria in 1493. The U.S. Supreme Court in 1823, case Johnson v. McIntosh, Chief Justice John Marshall's opinion in the unanimous decision held that the principle of discovery gave European nations an absolute right to New World lands. In essence, American Indians only had a right of occupancy, which could be abolished. Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you for sharing that, Lady Zaga. Yeah, I mean, there was a lot. When you read through constitutional law and you talk through these things, constitutional law in law school is two semesters, so it's a full year of studying the Constitution. You will really see some opinions where these men mostly, and some women, were just twisting themselves into pretzels to come to a conclusion that justifies an action. So the ends justify the means. They wanted a policy that they wanted to see happen, and so they would go and they would just wrap themselves into a ball of yarn to try to make it happen legally. And it sounds like that's some of what you're describing. Z. McClaw says that California cops, $150,000. Woo! That's pretty good money. That's pretty good money. I mean, I know a lot of lawyers who are not making that amount of money, and not even close to that, by the way. And these guys are, 4 years of college, 3 years of law school, grad school, and then you got to go and pass the bar. You've got student loan debts and all of these things. Where some cops, you can be 21, can have no experience, and you can apply for the academy, probably get admitted, and 10 years later, you're making six figures. Not bad, not too bad at all. And you're highly protected. You're protected by your union, and you're protected by your qualified immunity, and you're protected by your band of brothers, and you're protected by the media, and you're protected by Attorney General Barr and Donald Trump, and you're protected by the incompetence of everybody else across our country, specifically the politicians, who can't even, by some insane reason, they can't concoct a coherent sentence to save their lives, to ask a pertinent question that would be valuable to the rest of the country. So that's where we're at. Listen, I want to thank you for being here today. If you have not already gotten a copy of my book right there, it's called Beginning to Winning, and it is how to fight your case and succeed in the criminal justice system, written by me. Look at me right there. What a guy. And I wrote the whole book, and it's super exciting. It's on Amazon. I've got these different tips. I've got the 9 steps that you need to go through if you've been charged with a crime. And I've got these different attorney accountability tips that I put in here. So if you have an attorney and you want to know if they're doing a good job or not, you can reference some of these attorney accountability tips. So here we go. Here we've got one, right? Attorney accountability. It says, a word of warning, think carefully before revealing the trial strategy in your deviation request. I explained what a deviation request and how that works. So if this is applicable to you, check it out on Amazon. $16.99, I think it is, on Amazon. There's a Kindle version as well. Check it out. Listen, if you're not already subscribed here, do me a favor, subscribe. It's super exciting that more and more people are joining this conversation every week. It's been It's been really exciting. And I think that despite my frustrations with a lot of the protesters and with a lot of what we're seeing out there in the world, we're at least having the conversation. And so while this stuff is still getting itself sorted out, we're going to keep moving our ball forward. I know what I want to see. I know what I believe in. And I'm just so thrilled that you're here and you're a part of the conversation. Thanks for commenting in the chat. If you want to do a solid and help the show grow, I'd love you forever if you did that. There's some, a lot of different places where you can share this content. There's different places on Reddit. Bad Cop No Donut is a good Reddit there. There's 2020 Police Brutality there. I feel bad kind of sharing it there. It feels too self-promotion-y for me, and it just doesn't feel kind of good for me to do that. But if you've got an account, I'd love if you shared it there. I'd love if you shared it with your friends and family on Facebook. And of course, if you have anything that you want to talk about, throw it in the comments. Hit subscribe, and we'll see you next week. Thank you so much for being here. Stay safe, stay well, stay healthy, and I'll see you next week, 4 p.m. on Wednesday for Watching the Watchers Live.